The sizzle of the pan was drowned out by the chorus of anguished groans from her students as Holly Shaw demonstrated for the third time how to properly sear a steak. Every Tuesday evening for the past year, Holly had transformed the gleaming kitchen of Savory Sensations cooking school into her own little kingdom. But today's beginner class was testing even her legendary patience. "It's all about respecting the process," Holly explained, her voice warm but firm as she lifted the perfectly caramelized steak from the cast iron pan. "You can't rush perfection, and you certainly can't check your emails while cooking." That last comment was aimed directly at the man standing at Station 4, the one who hadn't looked up from his phone since class began 15 minutes ago. With his tailored charcoal suit, minus the jacket, but still wearing the vest, designer watch, and perpetual frown, he stuck out among her usual Tuesday night crowd like a lobster at a vegan potluck. "Mr. Zane, I believe." Holly approached his station, the rhythmic tap of her clogs against the tile floor announcing her arrival. "If you'd like to participate, we're on page 3 of your recipe packet." Maxwell Zane finally looked up from his phone, dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that momentarily caught her off guard. There was something familiar about him, though Holly couldn't place it. "Miss Shaw," he replied, his voice deep and unexpectedly smooth. "Forgive me, emergency at work." "The only emergency here is that you're about to ruin a perfectly good ribeye," she countered, nodding toward the unattended steak he'd haphazardly tossed into a cold pan. "Here in my kitchen, even CEOs have to follow the basic rules of thermodynamics." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "You know who I am?" Holly shrugged. "Your assistant called 3 times to confirm your registration. She seemed quite concerned you might be accidentally given a station next to the door." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Is there a particular reason Maxwell Zane, CEO of Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, is spending his Tuesday night in my beginner's cooking class instead of at whatever charity gala is happening downtown?" Maxwell's expression shifted, a hint of what might have been amusement softening his features. "My doctor suggested I find a hobby, something that doesn't involve quarterly reports or board meetings. And you chose cooking." "I chose your class specifically," he replied, putting his phone away at last. "Your wait list is longer than the reservation list at Alinea." I was curious what all the fuss was about. Holly felt a flush of pride she tried to hide by turning to his workstation. "Well then, Mr. Zane, let's not disappoint. First rule of cooking, heat before meat." She reached past him to remove the sad, gray steak, their arms brushing briefly. "We'll start fresh." For the remainder of class, Holly was acutely aware of Maxwell's presence as he followed her instructions with the same intensity he likely brought to his corporate takeovers. By the end of the 2 hours, he'd produced a steak that, while not perfect, showed promise. "Not bad for a first attempt," Holly admitted as the other students filed out, "though I suspect your talents lie elsewhere." "I never quit anything I start, Miss Shaw," Maxwell replied, methodically cleaning his station with a precision that surprised her. "I'll be back next week." Holly raised an eyebrow. "The class is booked for 6 weeks. Are you sure your schedule allows for that kind of commitment?" Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'll make it work. I find I'm intrigued by the process." "The cooking process?" Holly asked, gathering her knives. "Among other things," Maxwell answered, his gaze lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary before he bid her good night. Holly watched him leave, curiosity and something less definable stirring within her. Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals was one of the largest companies in the city. What was its CEO really doing in her cooking class? And why couldn't she shake the feeling that Tuesday nights had suddenly become a lot more interesting? The following Tuesday, Holly arrived early to prepare for class, surprised to find Maxwell already waiting outside the door, dressed more casually in dark jeans and a fitted navy sweater that made him look less like a corporate titan and more like, well, a very attractive man in his late 30s. "Mr. Zane," she greeted, unlocking the door. Eager to continue your culinary education, Maxwell, he corrected. And yes, I've been practicing. Holly raised her eyebrows. Practicing? I bought the same pan you used, cast iron, correct. My housekeeper was quite confused. The image of this polished CEO attempting to recreate their lesson in what was undoubtedly a rarely used kitchen made Holly smile. Well, let's see if practice made perfect, shall we? That evening's class focused on pan sauces, and Holly found herself repeatedly drawn to Maxwell's station. Not because he needed help, though his technique still needed refinement, but because of the questions he asked. They weren't the typical beginner questions about substitutions or shortcuts. Maxwell wanted to understand the chemistry behind why wine deglazes a pan, why butter is added cold, why timing matters. You approach cooking like a science, Holly observed as she demonstrated how to check the sauce's consistency. Isn't it? Maxwell responded. Variables, reactions, precise measurements seems scientific to me. It's also an art, Holly countered. Sometimes you have to go by feel, by instinct. She guided his hand holding the spoon. Like this, see how it coats the back. That's not measurement, that's experience. The momentary contact seemed to linger between them, and Holly quickly moved on to the next station, trying to ignore the warmth that had nothing to do with the industrial stovetop. After class, as the other students departed, Maxwell lingered again. I have a question that wasn't covered in today's lesson, he said, helping her collect the used utensils. Oh, would you have dinner with me Friday night? Holly nearly dropped the handful of spoons she was carrying. Dinner with you? Maxwell's confidence faltered slightly. I thought. Perhaps you might appreciate seeing how another chef interprets some of these techniques. There's a new restaurant downtown Ember. The chef trained under Thomas Keller. Holly studied him, trying to understand his angle. Mr. Zane, Maxwell, he corrected again. Maxwell, she amended. I make it a policy not to date students. A slow smile spread across his face. Is that what I'm asking? A date? Holly felt her cheeks warm. Isn't it? I was thinking of it as a professional consultation, two people who appreciate good food having a meal together. But his smile widened, revealing an unexpected dimple. If you'd prefer to call it a date, I wouldn't object. Despite her better judgment, Holly found herself returning his smile. A professional consultation sounds acceptable. But to be clear, this doesn't mean I'll go easier on you next week when we tackle risotto. I wouldn't expect anything less, Maxwell replied, a gleam of challenge in his eyes that Holly found surprisingly appealing. Friday evening found Holly standing outside Ember, second-guessing her decision to accept Maxwell's invitation. The restaurant was exactly the kind of exclusive establishment she rarely visited, not for lack of appreciation, but because a cooking instructor's salary didn't typically accommodate $100 tasting menus. She smoothed the front of her emerald green dress, wondering if she'd overdressed when she spotted Maxwell approaching. He wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, yet there was something different about him outside the classroom, a subtle relaxation of the intensity that typically radiated from him. You look beautiful, he said simply, no artifice in his tone. Thank you, Holly replied, suddenly feeling shy. You clean up pretty well yourself. Maxwell smiled. Shall we? Inside, it became immediately apparent that Maxwell was known here. The maitre d' greeted him by name, leading them to what was clearly the best table in the house. I hope you don't mind, Maxwell said once they were seated. I asked for a table with a view of the kitchen. I thought you might enjoy seeing the action. The thoughtfulness of the gesture surprised her. That's perfect, actually. As the evening progressed, Holly found herself genuinely enjoying Maxwell's company. Outside the corporate environment and her classroom, he was surprisingly easy to talk to, with a dry wit she hadn't anticipated. So, she asked after their first course arrived a delicate scallop crudo with citrus and chili, how does a pharmaceutical CEO end up in a beginner's cooking class? The truth this time. Maxwell considered her over the rim of his wine glass. The truth is embarrassingly simple, I can't cook at all, and recently that's become problematic. Problematic how? I imagine you can afford to eat out or hire a chef. I do both, actually, he admitted. But after my last physical, my doctor suggested I make some lifestyle changes. Apparently, living on takeout and restaurant meals isn't sustainable long-term, even with a personal trainer. Holly nodded. So you're learning to cook for health reasons, partially. Maxwell set down his glass. The other reason is, I'm tired of being the CEO who can't make himself a decent meal. I've built a company that helps people, but I can barely feed myself. Seems like a fundamental disconnect. The honesty of his answer caught Holly off guard. This wasn't the calculated response of a businessman, it was simply human. Well, she said, you're making progress. Your sauce last class was actually quite good. High praise from the demanding Miss Shaw, Maxwell teased. I have standards, Holly defended with a smile. Speaking of which, this scallop is perfect. She gestured to her plate. The acid balance with the fat, it's exactly what I try to teach. Tell me more, Maxwell encouraged, and soon they were deep in conversation about cooking techniques, flavor profiles, and the science of taste. By dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart that made Holly close her eyes in bliss with the first bite. She'd almost forgotten this was supposed to be a professional consultation. What made you become a cooking instructor? Maxwell asked as they lingered over coffee. With your knowledge, you could be running your own restaurant. Holly traced the rim of her cup. I did that route briefly. Line cook sous chef on track for executive chef at a decent place downtown, but the hours, the stress, it wasn't the relationship with food I wanted. And teaching is. Teaching lets me share what I love without sacrificing everything else. I get to see that moment when someone creates something they didn't think they could make. It's fulfilling in a different way. Maxwell studied her with genuine interest. You're passionate about it. That's clear in your classes. What about you? Holly asked. Did you always want to run a pharmaceutical empire? A shadow crossed Maxwell's face. Not exactly. I started in research, actually. I have a PhD in biochemistry. Really? Holly leaned forward. That explains your scientific approach to cooking. I suppose it does, Maxwell acknowledged. I moved into the business side after. A personal situation made me reconsider my priorities. Holly sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Instead, she asked, do you miss the lab? Sometimes, he admitted. There's a clarity to research that business doesn't have, but Pinnacle allows me to affect change on a larger scale. We're currently developing treatments that could help thousands of people with autoimmune disorders. The passion in his voice mirrored her own when she spoke about cooking. It was the first time Holly had glimpsed the man beneath the CEO title, and she found herself wanting to know more. By the time Maxwell walked her to her car, the professional consultation pretense had evaporated entirely. They'd spent nearly 3 hours talking about everything from favorite foods to travel destinations to books they'd recently read. I had a wonderful time, Holly said, meaning it. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for accepting my invitation, Maxwell replied. He hesitated, then asked, would it violate your student-teacher policy if I said I'd like to see you again, outside of class? Holly looked up at him, conflicted. It might, she admitted, but I'm finding I care less about that than I probably should. Maxwell smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Then may I call you tomorrow? You may, Holly agreed, surprised by how much she was looking forward to it. He opened her car door, his hand briefly resting on hers. Good night, Holly. Good night, Maxwell. As she drove home, Holly couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. Dating a student was complicated enough. Dating a billionaire CEO was entirely uncharted territory. But for the first time in years, she was excited to find out where this unexpected path might lead. The next 4 weeks of cooking classes took on a new dimension. By day, Holly prepared her lessons as usual, but on Tuesday evenings, teaching Maxwell had become both a challenge and a delight. He approached each recipe with the determination of a man who refused to be defeated by something as mundane as caramelizing onions or tempering chocolate. Outside of class, they began seeing each other regularly. Maxwell took her to art exhibits, jazz clubs, and once, memorably, to a food truck rally where they'd spent the evening sampling everything from Korean tacos to artisanal ice cream. "This might be the best thing I've ever eaten," Maxwell had declared, savoring a simple grilled cheese sandwich from a truck run by a former fine dining chef. Holly had laughed. "Better than the 5-course meal at Ember, different," he'd explained. "This is honest food, no pretense, just good." It was these moments when Maxwell shed his corporate persona and revealed the thoughtful, curious man beneath that Holly found herself increasingly drawn to him. Tonight marked the final session of the cooking course, and Holly felt an unexpected melancholy as she prepared the kitchen. After today, Maxwell would no longer be her student. While that removed one complication from their growing relationship, it also marked the end of the routine that had brought them together. The class was tackling soufflés, a dramatic finale that would test everything they'd learned about temperature, timing, and technique. As the students filed in, Holly noticed Maxwell looked unusually tense. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly as she checked his station. "Just a difficult day at work," he replied, offering her a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine." Throughout the class, Holly observed Maxwell working with uncharacteristic distraction. His usual precise movements were replaced with hesitancy, and twice she had to redirect him when he skipped steps in the recipe. When it came time to check the soufflés, Holly moved from station to station, praising the mostly successful attempts. When she reached Maxwell, she found him staring at his collapsed creation with a mixture of frustration and resignation. "What happened?" she asked gently. "I opened the oven too soon," Maxwell admitted. "Rookie mistake." "It happens to everyone," Holly assured him. "Even professional chefs have soufflés fail. The important thing is to try again." As the other students packed up their successful soufflés to take home, Maxwell stayed behind, methodically cleaning his station. "Want to tell me what's really bothering you?" Holly asked once they were alone. "Because I don't believe a fallen soufflé would put that look on your face," Maxwell sighed, leaning against the counter. "We lost a major research grant today, a treatment we've been developing for 3 years. The funding committee decided to go with a competitor." "I'm sorry," Holly said, understanding now why he'd been so distracted. "That must be frustrating." "It's more than that," Maxwell continued, running a hand through his hair. "This treatment, it's personal for me. My sister has lupus. It's what got me into pharmaceuticals in the first place. I wanted to develop better options for autoimmune disorders." Holly moved closer, resting her hand on his arm. "I didn't know." "It's not something I talk about much," Maxwell admitted, but watching her struggle with treatments that sometimes seem worse than the disease itself. "It drives everything I do at Pinnacle. And now we regroup, find alternative funding, but it sets us back at least a year, maybe more." The weariness in his voice was palpable. Without thinking, Holly reached for the remaining ingredients. "Help me clean up, and then we're going to make another soufflé." Maxwell looked puzzled. "Why?" "Because," Holly explained, measuring flour into a bowl, "sometimes when you can't fix the big problems, it helps to create something small that works. A small victory to remind you that not everything is beyond your control." To her relief, Maxwell's expression softened and he picked up a whisk. "Show me what I did wrong." Together, they worked side by side, Holly guiding his hands as they separated eggs, created a roux, and folded the mixture with a lightness that had been missing from his earlier attempt. "The secret," Holly explained as they slid the ramekin into the oven, "is patience. You can't rush it and you can't keep checking on it. You have to trust the process." "That's not my strong suit," Maxwell admitted. "Patience." "I've noticed," Holly teased, earning a genuine smile from him at last. When the timer dinged, Holly let Maxwell do the honors. As he opened the oven, his face lit up at the sight of the perfectly risen soufflé. "We did it," he said, an almost boyish excitement replacing his earlier frustration. "You did it," Holly corrected. "I just supervised." As they shared the souffle at the instructor's table, Maxwell reached across and took her hand. "Thank you, not just for the cooking lesson but for knowing what I needed tonight. That's what." Holly paused, uncertain how to define what they were to each other. "What people who care about each other do," Maxwell suggested, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Holly nodded, feeling the shift between them. "Yes, that's exactly it." Maxwell's expression grew serious. "Holly, now that I'm no longer your student, there's something I want to ask you." "Yes." Her heart quickened. "Would you consider coming to my family's lake house this weekend? My sister Madeline will be there. She's doing well right now and insisted on a family gathering. I'd like you to meet her, and my parents." The invitation caught Holly completely off guard. Meeting family was a significant step, one that suggested Maxwell saw their relationship as more than casual dating. "Is that too much?" he asked, misreading her silence. "Too soon?" "No," Holly said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. "I'd love to meet your family." The relief and happiness on Maxwell's face told her she'd made the right decision, even as she wondered what a cooking instructor would have to say to a pharmaceutical magnate's family. The lake house turned out to be a sprawling, yet surprisingly cozy, cedar and glass structure nestled among pines on the shores of Lake Michigan. As Maxwell drove them up the winding driveway, Holly tried to quell her nerves. "Relax," Maxwell said, reaching for her hand. "They're going to love you." "Easy for you to say," Holly replied. "You're not meeting a billionaire's family for the first time," Maxwell chuckled. "They're just people, Holly. My father will talk your ear off about fishing, my mother will try to feed you constantly, and Madeline will probably interrogate you about your intentions toward her brother." "That's supposed to make me feel better." "No," Maxwell admitted with a grin, "but this might." He leaned across and kissed her softly. "I'm really glad you're here." The weekend unfolded nothing like Holly had feared and everything like Maxwell had predicted. His father, Richard, was a retired engineer who indeed loved fishing and spent Saturday morning teaching Holly how to cast a line from the private dock. His mother, Elizabeth, was warm and welcoming, instantly pulling Holly into the kitchen to help prepare lunch. "Maxwell tells me you're teaching him to cook," Elizabeth said as they chopped vegetables side by side. "Trying to," Holly replied with a smile. "He's a determined student." "He's always been that way," Elizabeth confided, "even as a boy. Once he sets his mind to something, there's no stopping him." She gave Holly a knowing look. "He's quite taken with you, you know." Holly felt her cheeks warm. "I'm pretty taken with him too." "Good," Elizabeth said simply. "He deserves someone who sees him, not just his position or his bank account." Madeline proved to be a younger, female version of Maxwell, sharp-witted, observant, and initially reserved until she decided Holly was worthy of approval. By Saturday evening, as they all gathered on the deck for a sunset dinner, Holly felt as though she'd known this family for years rather than hours. After dinner, Maxwell suggested a walk along the shore. As they strolled hand in hand under a sky painted in pink and gold, Holly realized how comfortable she felt with him, how right. "Your family is wonderful," she said, watching the gentle waves lap at the sand. "Thank you for bringing me here." "They think you're wonderful too," Maxwell replied. "My mother's already planning what to serve at our wedding." Holly stopped walking, her eyes wide. "Our what?" Maxwell winced. "That came out wrong. I'm not proposing. Yet." He took both her hands in his. "What I mean is, they see what I see, that you're someone special, Holly. Someone I want in my life for a long time." "We've only known each other for 6 weeks, Holly said softly. "I know," Maxwell acknowledged, "and I'm not rushing this, but I also know how I feel when I'm with you, how everything makes more sense. How food tastes better, music sounds better, even my worst days at work are more bearable because I know I'll get to talk to you at the end of them." Holly felt her heart swell. "I feel that too," she admitted, "but it scares me a little. Our worlds are so different, Maxwell. are they?" He challenged gently. "We both care deeply about what we do. We both want to make people's lives better, just in different ways. I think our worlds complement each other perfectly." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting them in the soft glow of twilight, Holly found she couldn't argue with his logic. Standing here with the man who had walked into her cooking class looking for a hobby and instead found her, nothing had ever felt more right. 3 months later, Holly stood in Maxwell's penthouse kitchen, surrounded by the gleaming professional-grade appliances he'd installed after consulting with her on every detail. Tonight marked a milestone, the first dinner party they were hosting together. "Are you sure the sauce doesn't need more salt?" Maxwell asked, hovering nervously over the pot he'd been tending for the past hour. Holly tasted it and shook her head. "It's perfect. You've mastered this recipe." Pride bloomed across Maxwell's face. He had taken to cooking with the same determination he brought to everything, practicing each weekend until he could confidently prepare several impressive dishes. Tonight's coq au vin was the culmination of many Sunday afternoons spent in this kitchen, working side by side. "They should be here any minute," Maxwell said, checking his watch. "Are you nervous about dinner?" "No," Holly replied honestly. "About telling our friends we're moving in together, a little." Maxwell crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist, having second thoughts. "Not at all," Holly assured him. "It's just a big step." "The first of many, I hope," Maxwell said, kissing her softly. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of their guests, a carefully curated group including Holly's best friend and fellow cooking instructor, Olivia, Maxwell's sister Madeline and her husband, and 2 couples they'd become close with over the past months. The evening unfolded beautifully, with Maxwell proudly serving the meal he'd prepared largely on his own. When it came time for dessert, a chocolate soufflé that rose perfectly thanks to Holly's careful coaching, Maxwell clinked his glass for attention. "Before we enjoy this masterpiece that Holly supervised me creating," he began with a smile, "we have an announcement. As some of you know, Holly's lease is up next month, and we've decided that rather than renewing it, she'll be moving in here." Their friends erupted into congratulations, but Maxwell held up his hand to continue. "That's not all," he said, his eyes finding Holly's across the table. "Holly, I had planned to wait until after dessert for this, but I find I can't wait another minute." Holly's breath caught as Maxwell moved to her side and, to her complete shock, knelt beside her chair. "6 months ago, I walked into your cooking class as a man who couldn't boil water, who lived on takeout and business dinners, who had forgotten that nourishment is about more than just sustenance. You taught me to slow down, to appreciate process, to find joy in creating something with my own hands." Maxwell reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. "You've changed every aspect of my life for the better, and I can't imagine a future without you in it." He opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds the same deep green as the dress she'd worn on their first date. "Holly Shaw, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" The room fell silent as Holly looked from the ring to Maxwell's face, seeing in his eyes everything she'd come to love about him: his intensity, his kindness, his unwavering commitment to the things that mattered. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As Maxwell slid the ring onto her finger, their friends erupted in cheers and applause. The soufflé was momentarily forgotten as congratulations flowed. Along with champagne, Maxwell had apparently kept chilled in anticipation. Later that night, after their friends had departed and they stood together in the kitchen cleaning the last of the dishes, Holly marveled at the ring sparkling on her finger. "An emerald," she said softly. "Not the traditional choice." "You're not a traditional woman," Maxwell replied. "From the moment you called me out for checking my emails in class, I knew you were something special. The emerald reminded me of your eyes, your spirit, and that first dress you wore when I realized I was falling in love with you." Holly set down the dish towel and turned to face him fully. "When did you know that this was real?" Maxwell considered the question. I think it was the night of the fallen soufflé, when I was at my lowest, and instead of offering empty platitudes, you handed me a whisk and taught me how to create something beautiful from failure. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That's when I knew I wanted to create a life with you. Holly leaned into his touch. For me, it was meeting your family. Seeing you through their eyes, not as CEO Maxwell Zane, but as the son, the brother, the man who cares so deeply about the people in his life. That's when I knew this wasn't just a romance. It was something that could last forever. Forever, Maxwell repeated, pulling her close. I like the sound of that. Me too, Holly whispered against his lips. Though I hope our forever includes you learning to make more than just coq au vin and soufflé, Maxwell laughed, the sound warming her heart. I have the best teacher in the world. I think I can manage to expand my repertoire. As they stood together in the kitchen that had become the heart of their relationship, where they'd cooked, laughed, argued, and fallen deeper in love, Holly marveled at how an ambitious CEO's decision to take a cooking class had led them here, to the threshold of a life together neither of them had expected. It was, Holly decided as Maxwell kissed her, the most delicious surprise of all.